which is such a parallel to what he did to the children of Israel. Into Egypt and out again. And we began to see these parallels as we went. So what I wrote in the book was every little detail that happened to us, and there were so many of those little supernatural events that, you know, I've got almost a 500-page book, and it's only the first 3 trips we made to the region. So at any rate, we ended up making 15. But what ended up happening, we got to this traditional site, and because it was so fresh in our minds, what the book of Exodus records ought to be there, or at least the lay of the land that ought to be able to contain the tents of 1 million+ people. Something was grossly disappointing as we pulled up through the wadi systems and pulled up to the traditional site. It was, the first thing I remember being astounded by is, that mountain doesn't look high at all. How could they lose Moses up there? If he's at the top of that mountain, everybody in the valley could see him. I could see the top of the mountain. And so we became very disappointed. Jim and I looked at each other and went,
something's wrong.
Maybe that was not a real vision. Maybe we're just all wet and we built this all up in our minds, and, you know, we're
a wild goose chase.
It's a wild goose chase, and we just really wanted a big adventure, so maybe we made it all up. Maybe it wasn't as much as you thought. Well, for about the next 3 weeks, we had that much time off, and we actually did the whole rest of Egypt. We drove our truck from Cairo all the way down to the border of Sudan.
Wow.
And back up again. But one of the things that happened to us when we were in the very beginning, entering into the Sinai Peninsula, they compounded our truck and threw it in customs for 2 days, and they would not release our truck. We didn't have the proper paperwork to get our vehicle into Egypt. So immediately they...
You know you had gone through Egypt to get there.
Yes.
Well, it was the initial...
It was the initial
trip going across the ferry. When we got to customs, our vehicle was taken and impounded.
Yeah, it was impounded.
For 2 days.
So we were not planning to exit the country by the same way we had come in. We were actually going to drive up to Alexandria and go across into Israel from that way, because you could get in from Egypt to Israel at that time. You could not get in from Jordan to Israel except by way of Egypt. So because that was back in 1991, 1992, and they had not yet opened up the Allenby Bridge and the various other entrances from Jordan. So we were forced, by virtue of that little detail, which we now know was a complete arrangement from on high, to leave the country by the same way we came in. And so we were on our way back up, back onto the Sinai after having driven all the way down to Sudan. We were at the tip of the Sinai Peninsula in a place called Sharm el-Sheikh. And we were at a hotel there just waiting our time. Because of the nature of the Saudi Arabian laws, we had to stay out of the country a certain amount of days before he, as an employee, was allowed back in the country. So we had about a week left. And we were just sitting at the tip of the Sinai. There's a beautiful underwater reef there called Ras Mohammed, and we're avid divers, and you know, we were just, okay, we've given up the spiritual journey of this because we must have just been all wet about this Sinai and the Ark and all of this. So we were trying not to be too disappointed and just enjoying what it had to offer. The hotel had a little gift shop, and it was very, it wasn't a bookstore. There was one little bookshelf, and in that bookshelf I saw something caught my eye: The Gold Mines of Midian. Now, this was a reprint of a book that was written by Sir Richard Burton in the 1800s, and he was an explorer of vast portions of what is now Saudi Arabia, but it was the Ottoman Empire at the time. Make a long story short, in the back of this book, written in the 1800s, he had hand-penned a map of northwest Saudi Arabia, and he had the land of Midian on the east side of the Gulf of Aqaba, squarely in northwest Saudi Arabia. And when Jim and I looked at that, we went, oh my goodness, if Midian in the 1800s was known not to be in the Sinai, but to in fact be in northwest Saudi Arabia, we're looking in the wrong place for the mountain. Mountain's got to be in Midian.
That was a relief as well as a disappointment, I guess.
It was overwhelming excitement. I mean, we all of a sudden re-energized the possibility that we may still be on to something, that this could be real. And the very next day we went back in there, a book that wasn't there the previous day, appeared, and it was a great big volume. We couldn't have missed it, but it was called The Mountain of God, and it was by Emmanuel Anati, an archaeologist that was working in the southern Negev on a place called Har Karkum. And in the very first few sections of the book, he points out that the traditional location is in question, big question mark there, and that one of the possibilities was in Arabia, called Jebel al-Lawz. That was a clue. And then he had a couple pages later an identikit for what you should find if you found the right mountain. And the traditional site fits none of the criteria.
That's right.
And he didn't say anything about Jebel al-Lawz, but we knew through her connection, the land of Midian. Moses was in Midian. He had the encounter with the burning bush in Midian. Let's go. So for the next few days, we poured through these two books and then formulated our trip back into Arabia. We would cross back over the ferry, and then we would get down into this region and look for the highest mountain that we could find and see what might be there.
That's exactly right. And it was, I remember just being wild about, oh, can we leave today? Can we leave today? We've got to get back into Saudi Arabia. We've just got to be able to get back into Saudi Arabia. So that's really the details of that journey and what happened to us day by day is what the book is about. But what we saw when we got there was absolutely mind-boggling. And you know, that term just doesn't fit truly. I don't know how to describe this to you. When we first stood at the base of this mountain that's called Jebel al-Lawz, or specifically Jebel Makla, and again, we'll show you the differences here in the next few minutes. All I can remember is, you know, I have a big sturdy fellow right here, and we stood at the base of that mountain, and his knees buckled out from under him, and the next thing I knew, he was on the ground. And as soon as I saw him on the ground, my knees gave out from under me, and I was on the ground. And it was as though everything that was on the inside of us said, you're home. You're here.
Yeah.
You have found it. Not because of previous lifetimes or reincarnation or anything
something in your
goofy
spirit
like
says,
that. But something, there was
connected.
a witness there. Call it a residual glory. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. But we knew that we knew that we knew.
But the presence of the Holy Spirit was so strong, you couldn't stay on your feet.
Yes. And the very next thing that enveloped us and just shook us to the core was, bring this to my people, Israel.
Wow.
Say it again.
Bring this to my people, Israel.
Wow.
And think of it. If this is the real Mount Sinai, to whom would it be the most important?
To Israel.
It's not, well, the other one down south that they think is it, some of them, that's important to them. Even though they have all the discrepancies, and I've talked to rabbis about it, and they said, oh, you're all wet. It's not down there. But you're exactly right.
It's really amazing. After being there the first time, we had these moments for about the scope of 45 minutes to an hour, and then the frontier forces, police forces, were on us. Now these are a police force that live in the desert. They are of the government of Saudi Arabia, but they are not like dispatched from a headquarters or something. They keep their headquarters in the desert. And it wasn't very long before they knew that there were faces there that were not local. And
was there other people there?
we had only
the
seen the local nomadic
few
peoples, the
tents.
Bedouin. They live all in the region, depending on what time of the year is. They're either closer up in the mountains or they're closer to the sea. And those people have always been, very friendly to us. We had traveled extensively throughout Arabia before we ever made this wonderful trip to Egypt that started all of this. But they'd always been very friendly to us and everything. And to have these forces roar up and pull out AK-47s and say, "Get out," in no uncertain terms.
Were you behind a fence or anything?
Well,
No, not at the moment
Not
that
at
they
the
pulled
time
up.
they came up.
We had been escorted into the area by a Bedouin's young boy, a 10-year-old, had opened the gate, taken us into the guard shack, which was vacated at the time, brought us around to where the pillars were, where the, what we call this covenant site, and that's where both of us fell to our knees. And that was that experience. But after a while, he had gone ahead, he came back to us, and then we walked back around. It's a pretty good walk, takes about 15 minutes, back around to our truck. By the time we walked up to the truck, here comes the Frontier Forces.
Yeah.
And they jump out, and I cannot express how they tried to instill fear in us and intimidate us and insist that we leave. And I'm surprised that something worse didn't happen, but it didn't, and we were able to leave. But just the point is that that was our very first experience at this mountain. We've been back 15 times.
Wow.
In fact,
That's
3 weeks
how
later,
important it is.
the other thing that overwhelmed us after we got that kind of a reaction was, who do they think they are?
Yes.
And why are you not allowed?
Yes.
I think what welled up inside of us was like, wait a minute. Not only do we have a perfect right to be here, this belongs to our people.
Uh-huh.
And livid. We were livid. It was like,
Yes,
how
livid.
dare you tell us we cannot be here?
Uh-huh.
But of course, you know, at the other end of the
gun,
weapon,
yeah.
you're not going to argue too much. But
Right.
we kept this internalized.
Can I rewind the tape? What you mentioned pillars. You lost me there.
Right. Moses erected 12 pillars, each one of them representing one of the tribes of Israel.
At that place?
At this place.
And they're still
And
standing?
they're still there. That's what we're
Well, at
going to
least
show
9 of
you.
them.
9 of them are still
Yeah.
there, and the ground has been through earthquakes and other things, and it's kind of scattered around. But you can still see, with not much imagination, that this was set up. There was a platform built. Pillars were erected. It's an amazing site. Yes,
And
still there, 3,500. That's why I think that this site and this place.
Was it tabernacle?
The foundation
Yes.
of the tabernacle, we believe we
Right
have
there.
located where it
Yes.
was sitting. You know, it's the most significant biblical find in the modern era. And nobody knows about it. And what we're here about is
And by
we're
not
going
a
to
biblical scholar and TV evangelist or anything, just plain.
Tim and Penny.
Yeah.
just plain people.
But I want to. I see we've got. We're going to run out of time, and I have a lot of exciting things I'd like to share with you. So we'd like to roll they're 2-minute segments. There's a lot of information. People describe it, and I heard someone else say that it's like being hit with a fire hose of information. There will be a lot of information. Of course, we're not going to be able to get to all of it. But I would like to show the first roll-in, which is Sinai and Horeb, and it's going to give you an overview of the whole place.
All right, that's ready to roll. Let's see it.
Horeb in northwest Saudi Arabia, we found ourselves gazing in awe toward the south at the majestic beauty of Mount Sinai. Blackened and different from all its surrounding companions, this mountain stands apart at first glance. As we began our climb up the northern flank of this unique mountain, the dividing line between light and dark granite became glaringly obvious. Exodus 24:17 records that the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on top of this mountain. And now, sitting on Sinai's very peak, the color of these rocks can truly be seen. Coming into view now is the granite peak called the Brown Laws by ancient maps. After extensive research, we believe that Horeb and Sinai are 2 distinct mountains, and that is why they're referred to that way in Scripture. But for now, we'll go back to our view from the top of Sinai, and as you can see here, the valley floor below is enormous and well able to contain the huge numbers comprising those who came out of Egypt. About halfway up the eastern face of Sinai is this hidden valley that can't be seen from below. Exodus 24:9 and 10 tells us of a meeting of the Lord with Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel. They saw God at a distance and as it were a pavement of sapphire under his feet. And glancing upward to where the glassy blackness appears, it's not difficult to imagine a deep blue shine here from the glory of the Lord. Looking all the way down into the camp, we get our first glimpse of the altar to the golden calf. Fenced and forbidden by the Saudis to enter, we would have to devise a plan to get close-up footage of this on another trip.